impromptu setup here. I realize I am actually set up on the back porch at my house because my daughter has been taking very not deep resting naps today. And my office, as we've mentioned before, backs right up to her room. So, to avoid a repeat of what happened last night when I accidentally woke her up trying to record content, I decided to move out here. So I got kind of a handheld setup here. Hopefully this does the trick, but I wanted to go a little bit more into game one of this series here. Trevor Foster first in the house, Rangers King, what's good? So, if you guys saw my video earlier, my immediate reaction, obviously I was hyped about that Mavericks victory. You go in, it's a road game, your first road game of Luka's career, obviously, as far as like the playoffs are concerned, at least, because you had the bubble previously, and you go to the Staples Center and you get a 10-point win. You not only led at the end of every quarter, you built on your lead. You had a 3-point lead. We know now, especially with the Mavericks, they are 28-0 this year after tonight when they win the first quarter. If they lead at the end of the first quarter, Fat Lady is singing, that's all she wrote. So the Mavericks 28-0 in that situation. They then built upon that even more, led by 5 at the half, led by 6 after the third quarter, and now obviously you close out strong in the fourth quarter, even though it had scary moments, right? You had the teeter-totter effect in there in which they were trading the lead back and forth. I think the lead changed 6 or 7 times in the fourth quarter there, and it was very much in doubt because the Clippers, for all of Dallas's stellar three-point shooting, the Clippers just kept picking away at it. They were nails at the free throw line for the longest time in that game, and they got the performances they really wanted and needed out of their main two guys. You had 26 out of Kawhi, and you had 23 out of Paul George. Paul George got going late. It might have taken him until the first possession of the third quarter to actually make his second field goal, but he did get going. And to me, where this game was really decided wasn't just in the fact that you had Luka go off in the second quarter and show out as well in the third quarter. Luka had 30 points going into the fourth quarter, and yet he had only 1 point in the fourth quarter. The Clippers basically threw the kitchen sink at him and said, it's going to have to be these role players that beat us. And the difference in last year's team to this year's team is that the role players, at least for tonight, stepped up. Right? You got clutch plays out of Jalen Brunson there, back-to-back and ones, that helped kind of offset a run from the Clippers. You had another just stellar shooting performance from Tim Hardaway Jr., 21 points. I think he was like 5 of 9 from 3. Just phenomenal. The cojones. Not only that, but they had a great stat they threw up during the broadcast that I think it was Tim Hardaway Jr., and I can't remember which other Maverick it was. It wasn't Dorian. It must have been Jalen Brunson, are both in the top 10 in the league this year in terms of charges drawn. And they threw that graphic up after Hardaway took that charge in transition from Paul George. And to me, that was the turning point of the game because things had a chance to slip away, I think, at that point. You have the possession where there's a miscommunication there with Luka and KP. The ball gets ripped, and both of them immediately stop and turn to the ref. Clippers are attacking in transition, and Hardaway, despite being by himself with Paul George barreling down on him, gets in position, takes the charge, legitimate charge, not a questionable, could have gone either way. And that was monumental because not only do you get the stop, not only do you make the Clippers burn a timeout trying to challenge it, but then Hardaway comes back and he's like, that's cool that you tried to undo that, but now I'm going to bury a deep three in Kawhi Leonard's face. Totally covered. It's not even late shot clock. I'm literally telling you, I've got your number, and I'm going to splash this in your face. And so he did. And then a moment later, he slashes to the basket fearlessly for a contested lay-in. Like, fearless stuff there. Dorian Finney-Smith, playoff career high 18 points. He was stellar as well. I think he was 4 or 5 from 3, something like that. But it was career high in terms of points, made field goals, and 3-pointers kind of goes in that hand in hand. But just great performances from these role players here. And it offsets the fact that, like I said, the Clippers basically threw everything at Luka to force the ball out of his hand and see if those role players could step in and beat him. And beat them, they did. Not only that, Dallas reversed the script of the last 2 years. And we saw it at times this year, but it's always a different animal when you actually get to the postseason. Can you, in crunch time, perform and close out these games? And they did. Like, legitimately closed it out. Great performances. You have KP first go to the line, under a minute left. How loud is that plane for you guys, by the way? A plane is going overhead, and I feel like it's loud. But you have KP go to the line. He's had a rough game. He's sitting on like 10 or 12 points, three of 12 or something from the field. Just a rough game, and he made his first couple baskets too. So to be in that situation means he's gone ice cold. Goes to the line, needing to make those free throws to keep it out of reach, and knocks them both down calmly. Excellent. Then you have another situation there where you send Hardaway, I believe it was, to the foul line as well, and just coolly, calmly taking care of business, even though they hadn't been shooting as a team great from the foul line throughout. Whereas the Clippers had been shooting great from the foul line, and then the fourth quarter rolled around, and it seemed like they kind of lost their rhythm. Kawhi Leonard's missing free throws. Marcus Morris, an 82% free throw shooter, goes 0 of 2 at the line. And you just had these weird little things happening where the Mavericks were the ones making the plays to pull away. And the Clippers have no one on their injury report in this series. They are deemed fully healthy. And I know initially I said I thought the Mavericks were about as fully healthy as you could be, but it played out that that's not the case, right? You don't have JJ Redick for the entire series. He might not, depending on what happens this series, he might not ever wear another Mavericks jersey again. And Maxey, we didn't even know if he was going to play. Then he started, and he gave you 36 minutes. That is a huge thing that I want to really keep an eye on as this series drags on. This is going to be a brutal series. Like, this didn't have like the hard-nosed physicality that I felt like last year's series did, at least for this one game. But the Clippers are a damn good team, and they're a very good defensive team. It didn't have that physicality, but the wear on Maxey, I think, is going to be critical because, and they were talking about this after the game, if you don't have Maxey tonight, and he started, you're probably going to have to change up the lineup. And while he and Hardaway don't share positions, if you don't have Maxey and you're going to adjust, are you going to start a smaller lineup? Maybe, maybe not. That might make you kind of take a red-hot shooter the last month, Tim Hardaway Jr., out of the lineup. And that's not what you want to do. The dude was, again, 21 points. The dude was unconscious in the fourth quarter. He was daring Kawhi Leonard at times, and he was coming out the better for it. Incredible performance there. So, yeah, Maxey is certainly something to keep an eye on. If he's able to keep it up and keep going, great. That gives Dallas such a better chance. If he's not, then things are still going to be difficult. I don't actually know if Tim Hardaway's dad was there, because it was in LA, and LA has very limited attendance. I forget how many. It's less than 10,000. Whereas, and here's another thing to keep in mind, guys. Yes, Dallas did steal home court advantage with this win tonight, and most years, that's incredible. That is a huge accomplishment. It's worth noting the Mavericks were not good this year at home. They were a bad home team this year, for whatever that's worth. Now, another advantage Dallas will have is we're hearing that the Mavericks are going to have a near full capacity postseason. So Texas has lifted all these restrictions. The Mavericks are going to be basically welcoming in damn near full capacity. I think it's the only team in the NBA playoffs right now talking about doing something like that. So, it's weird after a whole year in the bubble last year of having pretty much little to no fans. Even the home crowd that was there for LA, again, fewer than 10,000 people, felt significant at times when their team would make a good play and the crowd would react, and you'd be like, ooh, I feel the atmosphere of that, and it feels oppressive. Like, it feels uncomfortable. And you're kind of wondering, like, man, it's funny how low that bar got by comparison just because of the last season. But now you're going to have your crowd there, and it's going to be a loud crowd, as that was a loud bug that flew over my head. But it's going to be a full packed house. Maybe that changes it a little bit for the Mavericks. Again, terrible home record this year. They do have home court advantage now in this series, but I think you got to keep an eye on Maxey, and you got to see how they respond at home, because the Clippers, I don't think the Clippers came into this series underestimating the Mavericks necessarily. I think they understand, like, hey, we know they weren't at full health last year. We know that they've beaten good teams this year. Maybe to some very, very slight degree, they still think, like, that seems like a better matchup for us than the Lakers. And I mean, it's a tough matchup either way. So maybe the Mavericks are slightly more favorable, although the Lakers are pretty wounded right now. So that's debatable. But the fact that people were aware, like the Mavericks locker room was aware the Clippers reportedly tanked the last two games because they wanted the Mavericks for the matchup, that resonates. So the Mavericks already had all the motivation in the world because of last year in the playoffs, the bad blood, the loss to them and everything. Then they hear that and it's like, dude, the disrespect. How dare you? How absolutely dare you? So it's an interesting tactic by the Clippers to actively kind of disrespect the Mavericks in that regard and not expect Dallas to come out and ready to fight. And they absolutely were. That first quarter was a very hot start that set the tone for everything. Yeah, I know KP went ice cold, but he starts out hot early on, splashes a couple shots, including a three, and you had the feeling like, man, Dallas is gamed up for this. Now, I don't think this is like, I'm not saying like Dallas is, oh, this is going to be the tone of every game. This is how everything is going to go. This is going to be a long series. I reluctantly opted not to make an official prediction for who wins the series beyond saying it would go six. I think win or lose, it's going to be a 6-game series. And the question to me is going to be Maxey and it's going to be KP. Because those, as far as Dallas's not just star power, firepower in general, but defensive capabilities and how they can possibly match up with the Clippers and particularly Kawhi Leonard, has to be, really, really high value on Maxey. That makes all the difference in the world. I wanted to see here. So Dallas started out in this game. I took notes throughout this, so I'm just going to jump through some of these here to give you kind of a recap of everything from tonight. So Dallas jumped out to a 12-4 lead to start the game. That is a polar opposite of last year, starting out down 18-2. If you remember last year's game in the bubble, game one, that was, did I say bubble and managed to make an unintentional with my mouth? That's amazing. You had turnovers on your first 5 possessions last year, and it was just like, ooh, welcome to the playoffs. This is rough. But it's a very different tone this year. You jump out all over them from the start. Dallas is 5 of 6 from the field. The Clippers, the fourth best percentage shooting team in NBA history, over 41% this year. Historic in terms of their efficiency in that regard, excuse me. And they started 0 of 5 from 3. I think maybe 0 of 6. So it very, very much set a different tone than last year's game. Like, it's also something worth noting. The Clippers, not only have they lost 3 of 4 to Dallas this year, not only, yes, they led the NBA in three-point percentage, but their 3 worst three-point shooting games of the year have come against Dallas. They're shooting less than 30% as a team against Dallas. I think it's like 27%. Maybe that was just tonight. That was 27%. But they have not shot the 3 well against Dallas all year. Yes, you had the one win that they got where they did shoot reasonably well. But that is an interesting trend because at this point we're talking 4 games. And yeah, I agree. You set the 51-point win out. You set it out of the equation because in a game like that, everything is going to be skewed. You can't really draw a whole lot from it. But you have to look at how the team performed in those other games, those other close games, which all largely mirrored what we saw tonight. And in those games, the Clippers still have not shot the ball well. Now, they are a great defensive team. And there was definitely a moment or two there throughout this game where I really thought they were about to not only catch Dallas. I mean, obviously they took a couple leads in there, but I thought they were going to take the lead and finally run away, and it didn't happen. When we got midway through the fourth quarter and things had been super stagnant, the Mavericks went ice cold because of the Clippers defense in that fourth quarter, and the Clippers were able to start wresting away the lead. Then I started to kind of question, like, all right, are they losing the momentum now? Is it going to be a game that they controlled throughout and then they lost in the waning minutes? That's going to be a really hard one to put behind you and move forward. And they didn't let it happen. They rose to the challenge every single time, whether it was Jalen Brunson getting the and one, and then I think Kawhi Leonard came back into the game and splashed a shot from the short elbow there, and then Brunson's like, oh, that's cool, I'm just going to go get another and one. Crafty drive by you to the basket. Now he missed the free throw, but still. A couple of responses like that, and then you have Hardaway, and then you have Dorian Finney-Smith. Just incredible, incredible resiliency, I think, from this team. And what I love is that it wasn't all Luka. Yes, Luka has a 30-point triple-double, and that's incredible. But he only had 1 point in the fourth quarter, and it was his other guys putting it away. And Dallas, the Clippers are a team that forces turnovers, but the Mavericks are a team that, with Luka, have not committed a lot of turnovers. They've been in the top 3, I want to say, every year of Luka's career in Dallas in terms of fewest turnovers per game. And the Clippers are going to kind of cheat in those passing lanes. They got long, athletic wings who can bat at passes and break things up. And Dallas just managed to, like, even as the Clippers were trying to put that pressure on late, Dallas wasn't cracking. Dallas was beating that pressure, and you're getting the KP flush that really puts it away again, like a just absolute back-breaking dagger. You're getting buckets like that where you're just breaking their back and then dunking on them for good measure. Great, great stuff there. Let me see. I'm just sifting through some of my notes here, seeing if there's anything else I want to touch on from this game specifically. Now, Rondo was one of those, I mean, that's one of the storylines. I haven't talked about it a whole lot, honestly, because Rondo was so many years ago here. Like, he's been on like 5 different teams, first of all, post Dallas, right? He had Chicago, the Kings, the Pelicans, Atlanta, and now the Clippers and the Lakers. So yeah, Rondo's bounced around a lot post Dallas, and I didn't really worry about it. I know that's kind of one of those old memes from the channel. I lost the initial season bets with Annie, and I had to wear every live stream for the entire offseason the Rajon Rondo Mavericks jersey, and then rip it. And it's even in the intro of one of the theme opens for the channel is me ripping the Rondo jersey at the end of the bet payoff when I can finally take it off. I knew Rondo could be an X factor. He's shooting a career high this year in terms of 3-point percentage and free throw percentage, and he's a very capable player off the bench. Playoff Rondo is a thing, whether or not we want to acknowledge it. And trust me, I'd rather not. It is a thing, and he was great for the Lakers last year in the postseason after being just ass the entire regular season, and it carried out this night as well. I mean, he had some big missed free throws. That is true. And he's a 61% free throw shooter for his career. He's not a great career free throw shooter, but he is better this year in that regard. I saw something. They said in the broadcast he's shooting 40% from 3 this year. Is that accurate? Can someone fact check that for me in the comments? But, I mean, he was leading a charge there for a minute. He hit like 2 or 3 threes in this game, including some that were just broke as shit out of rhythms. Pardon my French, Harper's in bed, and I don't have to overcompensate anymore with censoring. But just terrible looks. And yet, he was knocking them down, and then he's slashing the basket and getting layups and stuff like that. So he rattled off 10 quick points there in that fourth quarter when it started to feel like LA was taking control. And it was like, dude, if Rondo does us in, I might have to eat my words about not wanting to talk about the Rondo effect and the Rondo storyline. I wanted to focus more on these other things, but that very quickly made me start to think like, maybe I'm missing something worth digging into here. But yeah, the Clippers are loaded. They are. I think they are better than last year's team in that I think they're better balanced. And I think Paul George is playing better. He had one of his best seasons of his career, but until he does it in the postseason, and that he is the difference maker in the postseason, people aren't going to really get over it because his 2 years in Oklahoma City, he was not great in the postseason. He was okay at best. And his first year in LA with the Clippers, he was not good in the postseason. He hasn't been good in the postseason since Indiana. Really, you got to go back to what, 2013 in the Eastern Conference Finals against the Heat. If you got to go back that far to find the last time you were good and relevant, that's not good. And I'm talking postseason good. But yeah, it's interesting. One thing I noticed here, and I talked about this before, I think Dallas's ceiling is very much so dependent on how much of KP they can get out, like bubble KP, how much they can draw from bubble KP. Because if he's in his right game and mindset, the dude is nigh unstoppable. The problem is that we haven't seen much of that, certainly not with any consistency in some time. And Dallas wanted to get him going. They got him those first few shots of the game where he kind of got a little bit of momentum, and then it fell away. And I know the Clippers threw Kawhi at him, which was an interesting change-up. And they were just trying to keep him going because I think they understood they didn't have an answer for him last year. I think they kind of understand, like, man, for their chances at winning that series last year, they exponentially improved when he got hurt. And so I think in that regard, they wanted to try and make sure they kept him out of his groove. And so they threw some different looks at him in terms of matchups, and it bothered him a little bit. And so Dallas there in the third quarter at the very start, they're trying to get him going again, and they kind of go to him back-to-back possessions. One time he gets ripped, and it's a great play by Marcus Morris. He rips KP on the drive as KP's trying to go baseline, and then makes a great hustle play, saves it inbounds, and it leads to, I think, a transition three for the Clippers. And KP's stopped playing. He's kind of looking at the ref, mad that he didn't get the foul call. And you're just like, guys, come on, man. I couldn't tell if he actually fouled you there, but if he did, regardless, you gotta get back and play. You can't sit around and argue. So that was frustrating. And then I think the next play, he fired up an ugly brick as well. So he had plays like that where you're just like, oh, guys, come on, man. He got blocked right at the basket at another time. Now Kawhi got away with pulling him to the ground once, where KP had a great seal, and I'm trying to remember who was throwing the pass. I think it was Brunson. No, it was Hardaway. Hardaway was throwing a pass to KP who had Kawhi sealed, and Kawhi just flat out rips KP to the ground. Has a hand hooked around his waist, just yanks him to the ground. KP is not the biggest, stablest frame anyway, but he kind of yanks him to the ground. Ref doesn't call the foul, and so it's just out off Dallas on the pass. And even Kawhi kind of like flicks a glance at the ref like, oh, really? Wow, I was just committing the foul just to make sure I didn't give up a dunk or a layup there, giving up that inside position. But if I'm going to get away with it, sure. All right, we'll take the ball. Let's go. I don't think on that play KP flopped. I think Kawhi's arm is around him, and he absolutely pulls him. I just don't think KP has the strongest base. You know what I mean? Like, he's a big dude in that he's 7'3", but he's a twig as far as like his waist and all that is concerned. So I think he can be kind of tossed around a little bit, and that's just the element of KP. He doesn't have the girth, if you will, of Boban, for instance. I'm using Boban as a comparison because Boban's 7'4", so I'm keeping ballpark in terms of height, but trying to draw a stark contrast in their weight and their frames in general. So rough going, man. You could tell Dallas was trying to get KP going, trying to get something going, and it just wasn't dialing in. It wasn't working. He was getting blocked, or he was missing shots, committing turnovers. How loud is that? Tell me in the comments. I'm really curious. Some of these planes that go overhead are crazy close. So yeah, that's something to keep an eye on. On the plus side, I can look at all 4 games Dallas has played against the Clippers this year and tell you KP has only really played well in one of them. He's played okay a couple other times. And that, to me, is a good sign for Dallas. The fact that you've won 3 of 4 against the Clippers, yeah, one was a blowout and you can throw it out, but the others have all been close, well-played games. And
That's good to know. Thank you. Close, well played games. And so the fact that you're in a situation like that, where your second best player, a guy that last year you could barely once in a blue moon beat them if you didn't have both him and Luca dialed in and playing great. Instead, you're winning 3 out of 4 without him playing anywhere near the height of his powers. If they find a way to get him going, their ceiling goes through the roof. Does that make any damn sense? Their ceiling goes through the roof. I suppose it does, because your ceiling is under the roof. And so if it goes through the roof, you're pushing it up through. I don't know. Sometimes I cross analogies and I realize only after I've said it that it might not make the most sense. But your ceiling is far higher with KP if he's dialed in. If he's not, this is still a good team and still a problematic matchup for most anybody if you've got the role players playing. If they play anything like this, like if you can keep riding this wave of Dorian Finney-Smith and Tim Hardaway Jr. and Luka's going to keep being Luka, whoo, you got trouble anyway. They might win even if they don't have KP dialed in like that. But if you're able to do it, like get KP dialed in, dude, this is a different team. It is. Jalen Brunson had a good quote one of the last regular season games when he was asked about it. I think it was when they clinched the playoff spot, not the 5 seed, because they technically clinched that when they lost, despite losing the last game of the year against the freaking Timberwolves. But he said, no, no one really wants to play us because no one really knows what we are, and it's not that they don't know what we are just because of we've been inconsistent and not always at our best. It's because we haven't really been fully healthy and dialed in, and now we're getting healthy and we're dialing in. Like, no one really wants to deal with us. We're not a matchup. We're not a team people want to see. And it's kind of playing out that way. Like, the team has been on a major upswing. They won 8 of their last 10 of their last 14, something like that. 12 of their last 16, I forget. But they were running. They were hot. Speaking of hot, man, in the second quarter and third quarter, Luka was an absolute assassin. Missed his first three threes of the game, but then splashed like 5 straight. The Clippers had to abandon their strategy because Zubats, he might be a problem for you in terms of rebounding and offense, but man, oh man, the dude commits a lot of fouls, and he was on an island with Luka. If they were switching, good googly moogly, Luka was just grinning ear to ear with Zubats on him, and he was tearing him apart. The mid range fadeaway he hit drifting to the side, ooh, ooh, that was nasty. And then he hits the stare down three in the corner. Oh man, he knocked down like I said 5 straight threes. He basically made it where they couldn't play him. Zubats was a major problem for Dallas last year, and they basically made it where LA couldn't play him out there because Dallas was just forcing that switch, and Luka was using and abusing him. So that was a huge advantage there. Another thing worth noting is Marcus Morris, man, good man, he vanished absolutely in just a poof of smoke, a puff of smoke, just vanished. He shot over 52% from three last year against Dallas, averaged over 12 points a game, and was the absolute antagonist to all of DFW and Maverick fans everywhere. Beating the crap out of Luka, bludgeoning him over the head, targeting and stepping on his injured ankle that he's trying to play through because it's the playoffs. Just raking at his arms, smacking him, beating him around. And yet here we are. In this game, he's 0 of 6 from 3. He draws a critical foul on Dorian Finney-Smith, goes to the line and misses both. He was an 82% free throw shooter this year. Misses them both. And that was like right early on with the Clippers starting to just kind of lose their touch at the line, where it went from nails, just absolute automatic, to brick, brick, make, brick. I mean, they missed something like 6 of their final 10 free throws. Like, good lord, that's a huge thing. Now, one thing to discuss. We talked about how the Clippers tanked their last 2 games, and they had to tank hard, right? If you're losing to Oklahoma City and Houston in back-to-back games to drop in the standings, you should take into consideration they're not playing their starters a whole lot. Even though Dallas has played the Clippers well this year, even though the Clippers have shot their worst 3-point percentage, despite being a historically good 3-point shooting team, their worst 3-point percentage of the year opponent has been Dallas. It's sub 30%. That's worth pointing out. However, it's also worth pointing out their slow start could have been in part due to how much they rested. Rest and rust. You rest, you rust. That sort of thing there. So, worth considering. And then late in the game, their shots were just falling short. They looked a little frantic and out of sorts. And it didn't help that anytime they did something, Dallas came right back and scored. There was really only one bucket in the midst of all of that frenzy in the final 2 minutes where the Clippers just blew to the basket and got hammered home a dunk or something, where you're just like, oh, guys, come on. After that, Dallas was like, that's cute. We're going to lock it down now. Luka's going to swat a couple shots from Kawhi, and we're just going to call it. We're going to call it here. I mean, just awesome stuff there. So that's another thing to take a little bit of caution with is I don't think the Clippers, even though Dallas has played them well this year with regard to holding their 3-point percentage in check, I don't think they're going to shoot this badly. They're not going to shoot 27% every game this series. There's no way. No, they're too good. You're not going to get another 0 for 6 probably, out of Marcus Morris. Kawhi is going to probably kick it into another gear for at least some of this series. And 26 points was nice, but he was 9 of 22, so sub 50% shooting. That's not great. I think only 1 of 5 from 3. Paul George, he was slow going early, but he got cooking, so always keep an eye out on that if you're going to have Pandemic Paul turn back into still the worst nickname ever, Playoff P. Why did he think that sounded cool when he said that in Oklahoma City? Have to find a way to contend with that. And Dallas is going to have to figure out if they can keep this shooting going from Dodo and from Tim Hardaway Jr. If they can, dude, they're going to be a nightmare for anybody to deal with. If they can't, then they better damn well hope they can wake up KP and keep him healthy. Bubble KP almost feels like a myth at this point. Like, we saw it. We know what he did. 30 and 10 through the bubble restart, those 8 games, although he played 7 of them. Didn't play the last one for rest purposes as a bug flies into my eye. And then, it's like caught in my eyelash. It's like a gnat. I think I got it. So 30 and 10 in the bubble. We know what he can do in that regard. And we saw it for like 2 games in the postseason. And really only game 3 was his like go off game. The other one was a nice performance. It was something like 20 and 10. And you're like, okay, yeah, I see it. But then the next one was the 34 and 13 or something. And you were like, yeah. Oh, meniscus. Okay. It just depends, man. If Dallas is dialed in and they can keep this kind of consistent performance, then the sky is the limit. Let me see. Another critical thing, I talked earlier about Hardaway drawing the charge on Paul George and how I felt like that paired with his paired with his in your eye 3 on Kawhi Leonard the next possession. I thought that was the turning point of the game, but another potential big one was, I think it was early 4th quarter, or maybe it was the end of the 3rd. Luka being called for his heels were in the restricted area, and so it immediately, it overturned the call. Now, Dallas didn't get anything out of the possession, but at the very least, they avoided a critical foul, I would say, on Luka in that case, because I do think he picked up another one, so he would have been playing with 5 fouls if both of those had stood, and that would have been a different scenario towards the end. So, a lot of stuff to take into consideration here. I'm just looking through the last of my notes if there's anything too specific I want to dial in on here. I got the Morris stuff I was talking about. And hey, Dodo, after being called for that foul on Morris, snagged that rebound on the second missed free throw. He wasn't in position for it. He went in and got it. And I thought that was another big clutch play from him because LA could have secured another possession there easily. There was a weird play late And Luka, and I want to talk about this because Luka alluded to it a little bit in the post game. We talked about the wear and tear on Luka this year, how high his usage rate was, and we know that hey, he got a week of rest, but he did intimate when he was asked about his 1 point in the fourth quarter, and between what they were throwing at you and all that. And I'm interjecting here. Luka had back-to-back air balls on his last two shots. He had a good look from mid-range, airballed. Maxey got a beastly offensive rebound, kicked it back to Luka for a three, and Luka airballed again. And it didn't end up hurting Dallas, but this was like with 2 minutes left, and Luka had no lift in his legs. And Luka, in that comment post-game, even intimated that his legs were heavy. That, again, now you got 2 days rest between games 1 and 2, 2 and 3, 3 and 4, 4 and 5. You've got a lot of rest built into this series. That's good. But even with a lot of rest, it's going to be a long series. And it's round 1 of potentially 4 if you can go all the way. So that is worth considering as something to keep an eye on. I'm not terribly alarmed by it, but because he even kind of acknowledged the legs being heavy and gassed and everything in the fourth quarter, that was like, all right, well. And yes, I see people calling out he played 40 minutes. I know. I'm not saying like, I would have been fresh as a daisy. I'm not trying to say that. I'm just saying it's going to be a long series and he's going to have to play pretty much that many minutes every game. So it's good that those other guys were hitting shots because with his scoring absent and his legs not fully available to him, shall we say, in the fourth quarter, that had potential for disaster. So that is something there. KP's free throws made it back to, I mentioned those, his clutch free throws pushed it back to a 5-point game. And then Kawhi left a jumper short. Hardaway then got the slashing layup I referenced earlier. Clippers did answer with a quick dunk, and then you get the Mavericks beating the pressure and the double team to get KP a flush of a dunk. Pushed it back to 7. 76.1% of the time, the winner of Game 1 wins the series. That is noteworthy because the Mavericks have now won their first Game 1 since 2011 Western Conference Finals against the very young, baby-faced Oklahoma City Thunder, and that was the Dirk 48-point game. So, yeah. That's it's been a minute. Dallas had lost 6 straight Game 1s since that time, including that 2011 NBA Finals. So, there's a little bit of noteworthiness with that to call out that, hey, 76% of the time, the winner of Game 1 wins the series every time. Little Anchorman reference for you there. Yes, JP is correct. Called that out earlier as well. The Mavericks in the regular season were 27-0 when leading after the first quarter. Add to that tonight with a 33-30 lead they had after one. They are now 28-0 when leading at the end of the first quarter. Quick starts are everything to this team. And that's why I was very concerned when the Clippers were making their push in the fourth quarter and Luka wasn't getting anything. I was concerned because Dallas's offense went stagnant. The Clippers made a push. Rondo started to show up, and I was like, oh, man, don't let it happen now. That's one of those things that could also be a little demoralizing. Thankfully, it didn't come down that way. Yeah, so that's the notes I have on this game. It's a good win. It's a very good win for Dallas. Balls, that is loud for me. I'm glad it's not for you, apparently, but for me, that's loud. It's a very good win. Dallas in this series, you just had to steal one of 2 games in LA. You take game 1, you set the tone early, and you have not been a good team at home all year. You have a chance now to turn that around because you have home court advantage. And you're going to have a damn near full capacity postseason at home. So you got the next 2 games where suddenly the Clippers are going to be confronted by more fans than they've seen all year, and they're all going to be booing the shit out of LA. So you have a chance for the most meaningful, potentially impactful home crowd in a sporting event in a year. I mean, maybe longer, because for a long time, you're so accustomed to it for these teams. You're so accustomed to these road crowds, these hostile crowds, but now you haven't had crowds for a year, so now it's like seeing them again for the first time, and it might have a little bit of a little bit more of an impact on you. But we shall see. Let's see. I think that's the gist of the notes that I had to run through here based on watching the game, notes I took down during this, and all of that. Thank you guys for tuning in. I appreciate all of you. I will be back in my normal setup, hopefully, for game 2. This is just, this weekend has been absolutely insane. If you can, take a moment, drop a quick like on the video. If you're new here, consider subscribing to the Dallas Prospect. We are your home for Mavericks content especially, but really Dallas sports in general. A lot of Cowboy stuff as well, and in the backlog and stuff coming back this year. So keep an eye out for more. Consider liking video, subscribing to the channel. But come on, above all, just remember, every legend was once a prospect. Smooth silky butter. Oh, that was such a great off letting to the stream. That I nailed that. I'm still alive. Feel like yeah, awkward ending. One day I will learn how to more gracefully fade out and wrap up a stream. Until next time, I'm just going to say peace. Every legend was once a prospect.